Hi there, this is Greg Day, the Security CTO for Symantec, and welcome to my first video blog. Today I'm going to talk very quickly about the new Internet Security Threat Report from Symantec. This is the 17th that we've done, and I really just wanted to today take you through the kind of key findings from it, and over the next 3 or 4 days then we'll come back and talk a little about what do these really mean and what do you need to do. But what were the key findings? Well, some of the headlines from it. We saw on average in 2011 174 attacks per second. That's 5.5 billion attacks over the year. Certainly an increase, 84% increase on the year before. We've also seen an increase in the overall volume of new malware being generated, very much by all the cybercrime toolkits out there, now at roughly 13 new attacks being created per second. Third and final thing really within the malware specific space is this ongoing focus in on social collaboration and networking tools, this mentality of rather than trying to trick security, to break through security, how do we get the user to trust us or trust the attacker into then self-infection. Probably for me the key trend over the last year has been some new middle ground. We've been very used to the cybercrime element, all about randomly targeting based on either some sort of common weakness or vulnerability in an application or resource, and then at the other end of the spectrum we've had the advanced persistent threats. Now what we've really seen in the last year is a middle ground taking the best of both worlds. So the idea of focusing or targeting specifically against any organization, but using all of the tools and techniques that we've seen for the last decade in the cybercrime space. And we've really seen this ramp up over the last year, and we've seen literally from 2010, where there are very few targeted attacks. In 2011, we averaged 94 per day, right through to December, where we got to 154 per day on average. And I think one of the key things to learn here is it wasn't just the big companies that are being targeted. 50% of those targeted attacks we saw were actually at the sub 2,500 employees. And even within those, it's not just executives are being targeted. 58% of those routes into organizations were through non-executives, and over 70% of that was focused in the private sector. So that's one real growth area and change that we've really seen in the security industry over the last year. The third key trend that we picked up was the ongoing growth in data breaches, as we realized that the computer is not the target, it's actually the information being stored on it. And we saw on average now each breach is taking about 1.1 million records, a huge amount. Obviously some much smaller, some much bigger, but often there's a bit of a misnomer. One of the things we wanted to clear up this year was, whilst we see maybe a third of the breaches that are about device loss or theft, and a third that are coming from the outside attacker, and maybe just under a third that are from user error, actually the volume of records being taken, the majority, about 80% of the actual records themselves, will come in from those malicious outside attacker. The fourth and final trend that I want to leave you with was the changing world in which we work. So there's been a lot of discussion about the mobile threat in the last few years, but really in the last 9 to 12 months, what we have started to see is that kind of small but real growth in mobile malware. Very much looking at what can be done, how can it be done. We've seen Android marketplace move from having virtually no threats to nearly 4,000 threats this year. And we've seen a significant increase in vulnerabilities. How do I find a way in to that mobile environment? We ran our own research project last month in the US called Honeystick, and it was all about us leaving some smart devices out there and just seeing what the public would do with these when we found them. And what we found was over 96% of those devices were accessed looking at both private and personal information, and yet only 50% of them were returned. So when we look back across those other trends of malware, when we look across how they build trust through social networking, when we look at that focus on targeted attacks and the goal of information theft, we certainly see that smartphone as the next generation attack space. And we're certainly starting to see those early inklings of more businesses allowing them to be used, more business data going on them, more focus on being able to write attacks for them, and certainly concern about just what impact they will have on the business as well as the great value they bring. So thanks very much for joining me on this first blog. As I say, in the next few days we'll come back and talk about really what do these changes mean to our organizations, and what do we need to do to our security strategies to start to respond to these.